that possible. General Amos, the Commandant of the Marines, said he wants every Marine, from private to general, to know the history of the Marines who fought an enemy overseas and racism and segregation in their own country. I want every Marine and every American to know that history. Semper Fi. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from North Carolina.
Balance my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Ryan.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the gentleman, and I'd like to thank the gentlelady from Florida for making this recognition, and the gentleman from North Carolina for all of his leadership in the House on this issue and a variety of others. And just rise here to say I want to be in support of not only this resolution, but the eventual awarding of the Congressional Gold Medal to the Montford Point Marines. I think this is a great example of how we in America, sometimes it takes us too long, but we try to rectify these problems. And I hope that this is an opportunity for us to recognize discrimination when it's happening anywhere else in the military or across our country, that we shouldn't have to wait to honor these Marines 70 years later because of their commitment that they made. They were dedicated to this country. They fought racism. They fought segregation. They fought humiliation, all to try to serve this great country. And I think they really embody what the Marines stand for, the honor, the courage, the commitment that is exactly what it takes to be a Marine. So let us learn this lesson and also honor these gentlemen here today. Thank you.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I will continue to reserve the balance of my
Gentleman
time.
reserves his time. The gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Maloney.
Gentlelady from New York is recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by thanking my colleague and very good friend, Corrine Brown, for her leadership on this, and also the Chairman, Walter Jones, and Ranking Member Clay. And I am a proud co-sponsor, and I rise in strong support of this bill, and I am thrilled that the Montford Point Marines are with us in the gallery. And in 1941, President Roosevelt issued an executive order which opened the door for the first African Americans to enlist in the United States Marines, totaling approximately 20,000. These brave men faced segregated training at Montford Point, North Carolina, while white recruits were trained at Parris Island in South Carolina. Among these distinguished Marines was someone who later in life would become an outstanding mayor of the city of New York, my friend and now constituent David Dinkins. David Dinkins, Mayor Dinkins, enlisted in the Marines in 1945, immediately after graduating from high school, and served until the end of the war. He told me this story today about how thrilled he was about this gold medal, but he said one day he went out and the drill sergeant announced, "Everybody get on your knees. Thank the Lord, the war is over. Now get up, nothing has changed." Mayor Dinkins and the rest of the men in the Montford Point Marines served with distinction regardless of the prejudice and segregation they faced, fighting in the Pacific Arena during the Second World War in 3 of the bloodiest battles, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. They fought with bravery and valor, overcoming the resistance to integration within the services at that time, and eventually earned high praise from the Marine Corps commander. The legacy of their service has endured beyond the battlefields of the Second World Wars, as they opened the door for generations of African Americans in the Marine Corps. These brave men advanced the cause of civil rights while simultaneously protecting the freedoms of our country, and for that we owe them a heartfelt, deep thanks. Congress has already recognized the first African American service members of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, and this bill to award the same honor to the Montford Point Marines is well deserved, and I am so proud to be a co-sponsor and to be supporting it. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Members are reminded that the rules of the House prohibit the introduction of occupants of the gallery. Gentleman from North Carolina.
I reserve the balance of my
Gentleman
time.
reserves his time. The gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Davis.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the gentleman from Missouri for yielding. I also want to commend and congratulate Representative Corrine Brown for her introduction of this legislation and for the tremendous work that she did to get it to the floor this soon today, and I commend you for that. I have an uncle who was at Okinawa, and of course he talked a great deal about his experiences. But I also remember being a young boy doing Korea, and 2 or 3 of our older guys went and joined the Marines, and how proud they were to come home wearing their dress uniforms. All of the younger people were running kind of behind them, looking at them when they'd come to church or dress up. I have a large Montford Point Marine Association in my congressional district that I visit quite frequently, especially Veterans Day and other times, Memorial Days, when we pay tribute to veterans. So I simply come to say thanks to all of them who have helped to make America what it is and have helped to keep our country strong. I urge passage and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I will continue to reserve the balance of my
Gentleman
time.
reserves his time. The gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to first thank my good friend from North Carolina, Mr. Jones, for his leadership on this issue. And I know that he represents Camp Lejeune, and he has certainly been a friend to the Marine Corps, and we are all indebted to him for that. Mr. Speaker, the bill calls for the Treasury Secretary to strike a single gold medal of appropriate design in honor of the Montford Point Marines, collectively in recognition of their personal sacrifice and service to their country. The bill authorizes the Speaker of the House and the President pro tem of the Senate to make arrangements for the award of the medal on behalf of the Congress, and authorizes the Secretary of the Treasury to strike and sell duplicates in bronze at a price sufficient to cover overhead expenses. Mr. Speaker, to me this is the least we can do for a group of men who served a grateful nation so well. And during April of 1943, the first African-American Marine drill instructors took over as the senior drill instructors of the 8 platoons then in training. The 16th platoon, headed by Edgar R. Huff, the 17th, headed by Thomas Brokaw, the 18th, headed by Charles E. Allen, and the 19th, headed by Gilbert H. Johnson, who was mentioned earlier. Mr. Speaker, how much time is remaining?
The gentleman from Missouri has 1 minute remaining, and the gentleman from North Carolina has 15.5 minutes remaining.
Okay. If I may inquire of Mr. Jones, do you,
I will
gentleman yield?
I will close on our side.
I see. Okay. All right. At this time, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Pelosi.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for recognition. And I'm pleased to join my colleagues, Congresswoman Corinne Brown, who's been relentless in calling for this day, our colleague from Missouri, Mr. Clay, thank you for your leadership on all of this as well. To our colleagues on the other side, the ranking member on the Banking Committee, and then Mr. Pierce as well, who spoke about this. We've come together in a bipartisan way for a very patriotic occasion for our country. What a thrill it will be when we can tell our constituents when we were there to vote for this important resolution, which will, as we all know, call for the striking of a gold coin, directing the Treasury Secretary to strike a single gold medal of appropriate design in honor of the Montford Point Marines. How exciting. I know that many of those Marines or their families are here on Capitol Hill today. We look forward to welcoming them to a ceremony where these medals will be bestowed. I only wish that all of the Marines who ever served were willing to sacrifice their lives for our country. Some of them did. Some have left us a path since then. All of them the subject of the respect and honor that we pay. It's just another example of some of the inequality that has existed in our country earlier on. Long overdue time for us to redress some of that. We've had occasion in the Rotunda over the last few years to recognize the work of President Truman when he called for the desegregation of the military. General, Secretary, National Security Advisor, has many titles. Powell was here with us that day. We've had occasion to honor our Tuskegee Airmen on another occasion. So it is, we're long overdue to again take this other step to recognize the important work that all Americans have played in our most important responsibility to protect and defend. I will say this to all of the Marines who approached me about this legislation outside the Congress, that every time they did, I said, Corinne Brown has already gotten to us. Lacey Clay has already gotten to us. Corinne was absolutely relentless on this, and we're all here because of her leadership and the work of the members of our Congressional Black Caucus and the bipartisan support that we have. And, of course, we wouldn't be on the floor without the leadership of our Speaker, who enabled this bill to come to the floor. So but it's a proud day for the Congress. We'll look forward to an even prouder day when these medals will be bestowed. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr.
Gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, just a couple comments. Does the gentleman have any more? How much time?
Recognized.
2. Mr. Speaker, at this time, I'm going to yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Sheila Jackson-Lee.
Gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Speaker, I ask to revise and extend.
Without objection.
I want to thank the gentleman from North Carolina and the gentleman from Missouri for their courtesies. This is an emotional time for all of us, and we must pay tribute, first of all, as we pay tribute to the Montford Point Marines. We must pay tribute to Congresswoman Corinne Brown. We thank you, first of all, for restoring our faith in this country and showing us that we can work together as members of Congress. To be able to honor the Congressional Gold Medal to the Montford Point Marines is something that we would want to be the first legislation of this week. It awards the gold medal to the first African-American Marines, at Camp Montford Point in Jacksonville, North Carolina. And then, of course, it acknowledges their personal sacrifice and their service to the country. My father-in-law was a Tuskegee Airman. How long it took to be able to honor them. And as we begin to build this country on a more solid ground, it is important to acknowledge the first African-American to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor was Sergeant William Harvey Carney, and he received it during the Civil War. And then, of course, we noticed that the Marines started at its inception. The Marine Corps refused to recruit African Americans from 1775 until 1942. But immediately after the racial restrictions were lifted, nearly 20,000 African Americans signed up to become Marines and began their basic training at the segregated Camp Montford Point during World War II until 1949. Yet they were still faced with segregation and racism. We all know that the Marines are the first in. And as the Marines are the first in, then others follow. We're known, and they are well known, for taking the bullet first in many instances as they work with other members of the United States military. So today it is more than appropriate, Speaker, to be able to honor these fine, heroic individuals. I salute them. I thank God that we have the opportunity to honor them in this time. Isn't it great that America can unite together and go forward under a unity of understanding the dignity of all people? Thank you, Marines, the Montford Point Marines, and this is an honor to support the Congressional Gold Medal.
The gentlelady has expired. The gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to Mr. Bishop from Georgia.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I come to the House floor today to pay tribute to a remarkable group of African-American trailblazers and patriotic servicemen, the Montford Point Marines. These distinguished veterans did not just defend our nation in a time of war. Through their courageous acts, they helped to spearhead a movement where the goals of achieving equal opportunity and respect for universal human rights are now more intricately woven into our society. In 1942, President Roosevelt established a presidential directive allowing African Americans to be recruited into the United States Marine Corps. These African American recruits were trained at a segregated compound known as the Montford Point, a facility at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. Over 20,000 African Americans bravely served in the Marine Corps during World War II, and they selflessly, voluntarily put themselves in harm's way to defend our homeland and to safeguard these freedoms. This past summer, Mr. Speaker, I had the honor of attending the reburial ceremony of Montford Point Marine Private James Benjamin. Private Benjamin's remains and surviving family members were escorted to the Patriot Guard riders and members of the Veterans of Foreign Wars from the West Mortuary in Montezuma, Georgia. And he was laid to rest with full military honors at the Andersonville National Cemetery this past Memorial Day weekend. He was disinterred from a segregated cemetery because at the time of his service he could not be buried where white servicemen were buried. When it comes to recounting our nation's history and looking back at the trials and tribulations that were endured by the Montford Point Marines, I doubt there's a generation or group of World War II veterans who had it tougher than they did. People sometimes forget that they were fighting two wars, both foreign and domestic. But I would like to commend the spirit of these brave men because they guide me in my duties to maintain our government's commitment to fighting for our troops and for helping the troops who protect our freedoms at this time. Not only does that mean that we have to today maintain adequate salary and benefit levels for the military, but we've got to keep our promise to our veterans, our armed service retirees, and their families. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend my colleague, Colleen Brown, who has championed this issue and brought the story of the Montford Point Marines to the attention of our entire nation. I commend the Commandant and the Marine Corps for their efforts in making sure that our nation doesn't forget. And I urge my colleagues, therefore, to support H.R. 2447 and to honor the first black Marines with the recognition that they deserve and that they have patiently been waiting for. I urge the adoption of this bill, and I thank you, and I yield back to
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I think this has been a great debate. Again, I want to thank Congresswoman Brown for bringing this H.R. 2447 to the floor. I think any time that the House of Representatives can debate and bring soothe the pains of yesterday with the glory of today by honoring these Marines who served at Montford Point. So, Mr. Speaker, it is long overdue that we honor these Marines for their courageous service to our country. These men are a very important part of our country's history, and I hope that each and every one of our colleagues in the House today will join Ms. Brown in saluting these great Marines. So with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back his time, all time having expired. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2447? Those in favor signify so by saying aye. Those opposed, no.
Okay.
In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, to suspend and the bill is passed. The gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I want to ask for the yeas and nays.
Yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing. Sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20. Further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Does the gentleman from New Mexico seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2527 as amended.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2527, a bill to require the Secretary of the Treasury to mint coins in recognition and celebration of the National Baseball Hall of Fame.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Pearson, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend the remarks and to add extraneous material on this bill.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, baseball truly is the American sport. From the earliest age, we begin enrolling our children in Pee Wee baseball leagues. We take our children to games where we enjoy a day at the ballpark, eating hot dogs and Cracker Jacks. That's because baseball is America's national pastime. That's why I'm proud to ask for consideration of the bill before us. H.R. 2527 was introduced in July, on the same day as the 50th Congressional Baseball Game by Mr. Hanna for himself and 296 others. This bill was also introduced for Mr. Barton and Mr. Doyle, who managed the Republican and Democrat teams in the 50th Congressional Baseball Game. H.R. 2527 gives special recognition to a place that honors baseball, a game which, since the time of the Civil War, has occupied our leisure hours. The bill calls for the minting and issuing in 2015 of a limited number of gold, silver, and so-called clad coins commemorating the 75th anniversary of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum in Cooperstown, New York. The Hall of Fame Museum opened and admitted the inaugural class of ball players in June 1939 as war clouds gathered over the world. In the 72 years since its opening, the Baseball Hall of Fame has served as a home base detailing the rich history of our national pastime. More than 14 million people have visited the Hall of Fame. This commemorative coin program, which will be conducted at no cost to the taxpayer, will also operate in accordance with all the statutes covering these types of coin programs at the U.S. Mint. Further, the program has the potential to raise several $1 million to help finance the operation of the Hall of Fame through surcharges on the sales of these coins. Notably, to claim the surcharges, the Hall of Fame must raise matching funds from non-government sources. The bill ensures that all 3 coins will have common designs. For example, the bill requires that the reverse side, sometimes referred to as the back side of each coin, is to be in the image of a baseball. The bill further requests that the U.S. Mint try to produce the coins in such a way that it makes the reverse side rounded like a baseball. The passage of this bill, the commemorative coin bill, is one of those exceptional pieces of legislation that brings the House together in bipartisan fashion. Particularly at this time, a bill that can garner nearly 300 signatures of support from House members on both sides of the aisle is a good thing. I am pleased to be a co-sponsor of this bill, and I urge all the members to support this COIN Act today. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 2527, the National Baseball Hall of Fame Commemorative COIN Act. This legislation would honor the 75th anniversary of the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. H.R. 2527 calls for the Treasury Secretary to issue in 2015 no more than 50,000 $5 gold coins, 400,000 $1 silver coins, and 750,000 half-dollar clad coins in recognition of the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. The program would be operated at no cost to the taxpayer and would be budget neutral. Currently, H.R. 2527 has 296 co-sponsors, and I urge all of my colleagues to support the bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Hanna.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman from New Mexico for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in proud support of H.R. 2527, the National Baseball Hall of Fame Commemorative COIN Act. First, I need to thank several of my colleagues for their help in bringing this bill to the floor. Congressman Joe Barton and Mike Doyle, respectively, the Republican and Democratic managers of the congressional baseball teams, and the original co-sponsors of this bill. Financial Services Committee Chair Spencer Backus and Ranking Member Barney Frank for their support on this bill, and each of the 296 co-sponsors who together joined to commemorate our national pastime. I am privileged to represent Cooperstown, a picturesque village in upstate New York and home of the National Baseball Hall of Fame. As a 10-year resident of Cooperstown, sponsoring this bill is especially meaningful for me. I urge all citizens of the world, and baseball fans or not, to visit Cooperstown at least once. Cooperstown is a fine example of the beauty and grace of small-town America. Mr. Speaker, the National Baseball Hall of Fame Museum has spent the last 7 decades celebrating and honoring the history of our national pastime. This bill will celebrate and honor the 75th anniversary of the Hall of Fame. The U.S. Treasury will produce an official United States Mint commemorative coin featuring the Baseball Hall of Fame. Importantly, there will be no cost to the American taxpayer associated with this bill. The coins are legal tender, but will be produced in a limited quantity. They will become available in 2015 to mark the 75th anniversary of the opening of the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. Mr. Speaker, the story of baseball is a story of America. Baseball is a game of skill, from the most precise pitchers to the heaviest hitters. In the late 1800s, men of all ethnic backgrounds joined together on the diamond to play the game that would become America's sport. Germans, Poles, and Italians, Irishmen, Jews, Native Americans, and more formed teams, a hodgepodge of Americans, immigrants, all of whom found acceptance on the field. This game broke barriers long before the civil rights movement began. While much of America was segregated in the 40s, the great Jackie Robinson in 1945 was signed to play Major League Baseball. Integration began on the baseball field. The examples go on. From the storied tales of Babe Ruth, Joe DiMaggio, to the modern-day legacies of Derek Jeter and Mariano Rivera, baseball touches the lives of everyday Americans and fans around the world. I cannot imagine a more timely occasion than now, during the 2011 World Series, to honor baseball in its wonderful Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. I urge all my colleagues to support me in joining this cost-free bipartisan legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Speaker, being from St. Louis, Missouri, and going through this time with the Fall Classic, the St. Louis Cardinals happen to be in the World Series, and hopefully we can bring home a victory. Speaking of victories, I would like to yield 5 minutes to my good friend and the manager of the Democratic baseball team, Mike Doyle.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to express my support of this bill, and I'm happy to support legislation that would designate a commemorative coin for the Baseball Hall of Fame. I want to thank my friend and colleague Richard Hanna for introducing this legislation and for working to get strong bipartisan support in the House of Representatives. I also want to thank my good friend Joe Barton for his work not only in the congressional baseball game itself, but for working with me to help bring legislation to the floor. The Baseball Hall of Fame is more than just a shrine to the nation's pastime. The Baseball Hall of Fame is proof of shared American values, that baseball is not merely a part of American history, but has tracked the peaks of the American experience. Baseball is a game with roots in both England and the United States, which signifies the dual roots that define the birth of this country. Major League Baseball players like Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams gave up years in their prime to fight against fascism and for the future of democracy in World War II. Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in 1947, 7 years before the Supreme Court desegregated schools in Brown versus Board of Education, and nearly 20 years before the Civil Rights Act. And the entire world, even Arizonans, rooted for the Yankees as they played in the World Series just weeks after the country was attacked on September 11th. I'm also a supporter of the bill because baseball is an essential part of the experience of my district, more especially the city of Pittsburgh. The Pirates are one of the original Major League Baseball teams, founded in 1887, and played in the first ever World Series. As someone who's lived in Pittsburgh my entire life, I have experienced the thrill of victory and, more recently, the agony of defeat as I've watched my beloved Pirates. As a young fan, I had the honor of watching my most favorite person ever to wear a baseball uniform, Roberto Clemente, a 12-time All-Star, a 12-time Golden Glove winner, MVP, and an impressive .317 lifetime batting average. He was not only a great baseball player, but a great humanitarian. After Roberto single-handedly helped the Pirates win the World Series in 1971 over the heavily favored Baltimore Orioles, Roberto was tragically killed in a plane crash just a few months later, bringing relief supplies to victims of the Nicaraguan earthquake in 1972. He will forever be remembered and beloved, not only by his native homeland of Puerto Rico and his adoptive home of Pittsburgh, but by baseball fans across the world. You know, other sports may have more followers or more revenues or more popularity, but no other sport is so tied to the core of American experience as baseball. And now, because of this bill, Americans as well as international visitors can be assured that they can visit the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. Commemorative coins celebrate and honor American traditions. As well as commemorating important aspects of American history and culture, these coins help raise money for important causes. This coin will raise funds to ensure that Cooperstown will not only be open to the nation and the world now, but also for generations and generations beyond us, and will cost the government and the American taxpayer absolutely nothing. This bill couldn't come at a better time. We are at a point in our history when the defining standards of American life can seem lost. The idea that hard work ensures a decent life, that the future is always better than the past, that what unites us is always stronger than what divides us. There was a time when these notions were not just truths, but reliable truths. They were promises. We are now at a time when people feel a little less secure about the truth of American greatness. Well, I still believe in American greatness, and I think most Americans still believe in American greatness. And I believe that we need to celebrate that greatness wherever possible. This bill does just that. The Baseball Hall of Fame has personal importance for me because it reminds me of a time when the country's game was defined by great teams and great players, not large bankrolls and corporate-named stadiums. It's a reminder of when the game was ruled by talent and love of the game. That's why we need the Hall of Fame. That's why I'm proud to support this bill. And that's why I ask all my colleagues to vote for it. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, after last night's game in the World Series, most Americans understand that T is for Texas. I would like to recognize the manager of the Republican team, Mr. Barton from Texas. Would yield him 3 minutes.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, and I want to thank the most valuable player for the Republican baseball team this year for the time. I want to commend Mr. Doyle, the manager of the Democratic congressional team, for his victory, and commend Mr. Clay, Congressman Clay, whose St. Louis Cardinals are playing my Texas Rangers in the World Series, who proudly wears the St. Louis Cardinal uniform in the congressional game, that in the next 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday night, at least one of those games, the Rangers win so that they can get their first World Series championship in history. And once that happens between them, the Rangers and the Cardinals will have 11 World Series championships. So I want to thank Congressman Hanna for his excellent work on this bill. I am a proud co-sponsor of it. I have the not the congressional baseball, but the Cooperstown Hall of Fame baseball cap on my head, which I'm violating the rules of the House, so I have to take it off immediately. But it is a great institution. 14 million Americans have visited it in person since it was established in 1939. I hope to take my son, or sons, I have 2 sons and 2 grandsons, to that Hall of Fame in person in the very near future. It truly is a history of America, from Babe Ruth of yesteryear to my childhood heroes, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, people like that, Nolan Ryan, the current general manager of the Texas Rangers, to last night's heroes, Mike Napoli, who hit the home run in the bottom of the 8th inning, hit the double and hit a home run earlier, or Albert Pujols, who had 3 home runs Saturday night, I think 14 total bases, an amazing player who will certainly be in the Hall of Fame. This is truly a win-win for everyone. There's no cost to the taxpayer. The coin self-generates its funding. We can all celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Baseball Hall of Fame by supporting this legislation, and at the appropriate time I would encourage all the members of the House of Representatives to do so. And again, go Rangers. Let's win the first World Series in Texas Ranger history this week.
Time of the gentleman's expired. The gentleman from Missouri.
Let me thank my friend from Texas first, Mr. Barton, for his encouragement for his home team. And we are certain that the better team will prevail in this Fall Classic. At this time, Mr. Speaker, would like to recognize a gentlewoman from New York for 2 minutes.
Recognized for 2 minutes.
As a representative from the proud city of New York, which is the home of the New York Yankees and the New York Mets, I rise with strong enthusiasm in support of the National Baseball Hall of Fame commemorative coin, which was introduced by my friend and colleague from New York, Mr. Hahn, Congressman Hahn, and also congratulate Mike Doyle, not only for his work on this bill, but his winning work on the field of baseball here in Congress. Sales of the coin will go to the Baseball Hall of Fame to finance its operations with matching funds raised from non-government sources. The program will be operated at no cost to the American taxpayer, but will help the Baseball Hall of Fame to do its important work, not only now, but into the generations to come. Since the Hall of Fame and museum opened in June of 1939, 14 million people have visited the site, which houses more than 38,000 3D artifacts, 500,000 photographs, and 12,000 hours of recorded media on our nation's most favorite pastime. Coopersville also claims to be the home of the original baseball game here in the United States. It truly is an institution in itself and serves as an educational tool in the classroom through video conferences, technology, and interactive lessons across the nation. A coin to commemorate the Hall of Fame will ensure that it can continue to do the good work it has been doing for over 70 years. So I am so proud that it's located in my state, and we have finally found something we can all agree on, our favorite pastime in America, baseball. I also want to note, if I could get additional minute, please.
I yield an additional 1 minute.
The gentlelady has 1 additional minute.
I think it's important, given that we just passed the important and historic gold medal for the Montford Point Marines, and recognize their fight in ending and promoting and protecting human rights and civil rights. Literally, integration began on the baseball field. There on the mound, people come from across the country, from all ethnic backgrounds, sometimes from foreign countries, to come together and support and work together in this wonderful sport that is truly an American sport. And I would say the nation's Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum has spent many decades celebrating and honoring baseball. This bill will be able to continue their good, hard work, and I urge all my colleagues to join me in supporting this cost-free, bipartisan legislation that hopefully every one of us can agree on.
Gentlelady's time
Thank
has
you.
expired. The gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, the competition between the gentleman from Texas and the gentleman from Missouri, notwithstanding the tentative bipartisan effort is moving slowly forward, I would yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Gibson.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this legislation to provide a commemorative coin for the National Baseball Hall of Fame, sponsored by my friend and colleague from New York, Mr. Hanna. Tourism is one of the most important drivers of our local economy in upstate New York. Many jobs tied to it. And the over 350,000 visitors to the museum each year provide a much-needed and important boost for the economy in the greater Cooperstown area. Baseball is America's pastime, a sport I played growing up in my hometown of Kinderhook, New York, and one that our son, Connor, plays now. On Columbus Day, just passed, I visited the Hall of Fame with Connor. It was a very special bonding moment for both of us, and one that millions of American families have had the opportunity to do over the last 72 years. This legislation will help promote the Hall of Fame, will help provide a boost to our local economy, that tourism effort, and do so without costing the taxpayers a single penny. It's good legislation, and we should all support it. I urge my colleagues to do so. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Missouri.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I have no further speakers, and I certainly think that the National Baseball Hall of Fame is deserving of this recognition, and I urge all of my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Missouri yields back his time. The gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, the original sponsor of the bill, Mr. Hanna, would like to go into extra innings. I'd like to recognize him for 1 more minute.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank the gentleman from New Mexico. Well, every student of baseball knows, including my sister Robin, who's told me many times, that the New York Yankees are the finest team in the history of baseball. I would like to take this opportunity to wish good luck in the World Series to the Texas Rangers and the St. Louis Cardinals. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 2527, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, I have no other speakers and would yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2527? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Or opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. Yes, the gentleman from Missouri. Go ahead. The gentleman from New Mexico.
I have a couple of letters here that I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert into the record.
Does the gentleman from Missouri request a recorded vote?
Yes, I do, Mr. Speaker. I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking the vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. Sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Mexico rise?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask unanimous consent that, to insert two letters into the record.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered. Okay. Sorry, I forgot the... Did you note that I didn't say as amended?
Well,
okay.
Record, thanks. Yeah.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2042.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2042, a bill to require the Secretary of Homeland Security, in consultation with the Secretary of State, to establish a program to issue Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation business travel cards and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Turner, and the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Loretta Sanchez, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 2042, the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation Business Travel Cards Act of 2011. This measure is needed to grant to the Department of Homeland Security the authority to issue APEC business cards, ABTC, as part of their overall Trusted Traveler programs operated by Customs and Border Protection for expedited re-entry into the United States. The APEC business card travel program is an initiative of the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum and is designed to facilitate commerce by promoting fast and efficient travel of eligible business people and government officials within the Asian Pacific region. This legislation will allow eligible U.S. business travelers to apply for Trusted Traveler cards for expedited entry to certain Asian Pacific nations which are members of the APEC Forum. At this transition, members of APEC, the United States already provides foreign business travelers who have APEC business travel cards with expedited scheduling of visa interviews at U.S. embassies and consulates and use of dedicated lanes of expedited entry when traveling to the United States. However, since the United States has not yet issued cards for U.S. citizens who wish to participate in this program, Americans are currently unable to enjoy the same time-saving benefits that some 70,000 foreign holders of APEC business cards enjoy when coming to the United States. During these challenging economic times, we must all do what we can to facilitate business development, and that includes encouraging international travel and negotiations. Expanding U.S. participation in the APEC business travel card is a simple way to support these goals and facilitate travel, whether it be through LAX or JFK. Of note, this legislation will have no deterrent on the homeland security of the United States, as all foreign visitors who are citizens of an APEC member economy must continue to go through the standard travel procedures of obtaining a visa or filling out the web-based electronic system of travel authorization for visa waiver program countries. Currently, 18 of 21 APEC economies are full members of the APEC business travel card program. The United States currently participates as a transitional member along with Canada and Russia. Enabling this legislation will demonstrate the U.S. commitment to economic integration and engagement in the Asian-Pacific region. The measure has strong bipartisan support and enjoys the support of U.S. business community, including the National Center of APEC, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and the U.S. Travel Association. I urge members to support the bill and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentlelady from California.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of H.R. 2042, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a member of the Committee on Homeland Security and a representative from the great state of California, which has very strong economic ties to the Pacific region, I am proud to be a co-sponsor of what I believe is one of the most important things that we can do with respect to trade and getting American jobs going. The primary goal of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Organization is to support sustainable growth, economic growth, and prosperity in the Asian-Pacific region. The United States is among the group's 21 member economies, which account for 55% of global GDP. They purchase 58% of United States goods exports and comprise a market of 2.7 billion consumers. 7 of America's top 15 trade partners are in APEC. So this bill would require the Secretary of Homeland Security, in consultation with the Secretary of the State, to establish a program to issue APEC business travel cards to eligible U.S. citizen business leaders and senior United States government officials who are actively engaged in APEC business. The APEC business travel cards would expedite the individual's international travel within the 21 APEC member countries. There are similar cards already available to APEC travelers in the United States. H.R. 2042 would allow U.S. citizens to enjoy similar travel benefits abroad. It requires the Secretary of Homeland Security to integrate application procedures for and issuance of APEC business travel cards with other appropriate international registered traveler programs of the Department of Homeland Security, such as Sentry and Global Entry and Nexus and some of the other programs we already have to expedite travel from one country into the other. And finally, the bill permits the Secretary of Homeland Security, of course, to impose a fee that would cover the cost of issuing these cards. H.R. 2042 is supported by the Obama administration. So next month, the U.S. is hosting APEC for 2011. It's the first time since 1993. It's going to include meetings in Washington, D.C., in Big Sky, Montana, in San Francisco, California, culminates in the APEC leaders meeting in Honolulu, Hawaii in November. So I think it would be appropriate that the House pass H.R. 2014 in advance of this meeting this next month. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady reserves her time. The gentleman from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from the state of Texas, Mr. Brady.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise in support of H.R. 2042, the APEC business travel card, and appreciate working with my counterpart, Congressman Larson, on this legislation. This bill provides security-vetted American business and government travelers the same time-saving benefits as their counterparts in other Asia-Pacific economic cooperation countries. The bill is supported by leaders in both parties, including the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, Representative Peter King, and I appreciate his leadership. And this bill provision was included in the authorizing bill recently reported by the House Committee on Homeland Security. The card was originally created to increase economic engagement in a region that continues to grow and grow, and to expedite secure business travel for those who make frequent business trips to these economies. But today the United States is only one of 3 economies within APEC that hasn't yet provided these travel cards to their frequent business travelers. This bill would allow Customs and Border Protection to issue the travel cards to our citizens after conducting background checks, confirming frequent travel to the APEC region, and collecting fees to cover the full cost. The 2 big benefits beyond increased security is equal treatment for Americans, our counterparts. Frequent business government travelers who do business within these countries in the region already enjoy these benefits. This provides it to United States citizens, and then basically make sure we stay competitive in that region. That region is blowing and going economically. They represent more than half of the world's economy. They buy almost 58% of what America sells, and they are, as Congressman Sanchez says, a major new customers for our farmers and ranchers, our technology companies, our manufacturing companies, and our services workers as well. So I fully support this bill. It's important that our business travelers in America get out there to sell American products throughout this important region. It has strong business support, and I urge member support as well. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady from California.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Washington State, Mr. Larson.
The gentleman from Washington State is recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 2042, the APEC Business Travel Card Bill. This bill is a bipartisan bill that levels a playing field for U.S. businessmen and women who export their products into other APEC economies. Since joining the APEC Business Travel Card Program as a transitional member in 2007, the U.S. has been extending the benefits of having an APEC Business Travel Card to foreign businessmen and women in 18 other economies, but not to our own. These benefits include being permitted to use the crew or designated APEC Business Travel Card lanes in airports when entering a country, and expedited visa processing. As of October 12, 2011, there were over 100,000 foreign ABTC holders, but no Americans. Today's legislation simply levels the playing field by directing the Department of Homeland Security to establish an APEC Business Travel Card that will allow Americans to use the card to gain expedited entry into participating APEC economies when they go abroad and use Customs and Border Protection's, or CBP's, Global Entry Program for expedited reentry back into the United States. This will make travel throughout the Asia-Pacific region easier for American businessmen and women and help them to more efficiently sell their products overseas. I want to thank my good friend, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Brady, for his hard work on this bill, as well as fellow APEC caucus co-chairs, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Crowley, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Herger, for their support as well. The future of the United States is tied to the Asia-Pacific region. With the hosting of the APEC Summit by the United States in less than a month, it is important that APEC Business Travel Card Program is established. I urge my colleagues to support this bill as well. In conclusion, I want to thank the leadership of this House for working with me and the gentleman from Texas to get this bill scheduled for the House's consideration. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
New York.
Speaker, I have no more speakers. If the gentlelady from California has no further speakers, I am prepared to close once the gentlelady does.
Gentleman from New York reserves his time. The gentlelady from California.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers, and since the gentleman from New York is ready to close, then I am prepared to close also. I would yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So H.R. 2042 represents a small but important step toward facilitating travel and enhancing business ties with our Asia-Pacific region. And I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back her time. The gentleman from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In closing, this bill is an opportunity to facilitate travel, promote economic growth, and enhance security. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. All time has expired. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2402? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the two-thirds being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended and the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The Chair lays before the House the following enrolled bill.
H.R. 1975, an act to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 281 East Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena, California, as the First Lieutenant Oliver Goodall Post Office Building.
Hey. So I